Thank you very much. You are now at the Climate Movers and Shakers interview for the Los Angeles Climate Reality Project. My name is Charles Miller. I'm the chapter chair. We have a treat for you tonight. We have a wonderful guest in our ongoing series that has had all kinds of people from politicians to celebrities to advocates working at the very lowest levels and the very highest levels of the world in the fight for climate. And today we have somebody who has a lot of experience and has taken on a lot of battles and a lot of things to share with us. Um, I met David Girón. I had to look it up through my old emails. I met David Girón 14 years ago. So I've known him a long time. And he started working for the former council member in CD5, Paul Koretz, I believe in 2010. And around that time, I was on the Palms Neighborhood Council, which I'm still on. So I guess he's moved more forward than I have. And we got to know each other a little bit as he was the field deputy for CD5 at that time, which is kind of I think it's fair to say it's a kind of an entry level job within a city staffing kind of a situation. And that person goes out and goes to the meetings and does all the the evening kind of work. But one thing I noticed about David, which I had been through several people who had been field deputies from that office before, is that we were having events and we were doing things and we were trying to change the world in our own little way within our neighborhood. David actually showed up at our events, and he was the first person who did that kind of thing. And it made a really real impression on me. And I had some good experiences working with him over the years. He's moved on and done all kinds of great things. But the reason I mainly wanted David to be our guest this evening is that we recently had an election, as Michael was talking about. And, I don't know about you guys, but I am involved in quite a few environmental groups, and I have been to probably 15 meetings in the last few weeks where they start out as kind of a, a suicide watch. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but everybody's very upset and everybody's worried that everything's going to hell and we can't do anything to stop it. We are a nonpartisan organization. That being said, when one political party kind of denies the existence of the very reason that we've come together, it puts us in the awkward position of acknowledging that most of the people have an issue with that. And on top of that, right now, there's a lot of reasons why people are upset and worried and have a lot of uncertainty going forward. And David's been through that before. And so that's why I think he's a great person to talk to. David ran for state assembly in just this last year, and he got endorsed by pretty much all the organizations that are involved in climate. He got really great write-ups, and a lot of the organizations that say vote for this person because of their policies supported David. He didn't make it out of the primary. He came close, but didn't quite make it out of the primary, and had to, after getting all that support and doing all the right things, had to accept the fact that the voters didn't pick him, and he had to kind of find out what he was going to do. He didn't miss a beat at all. He works for Councilmember Blumenfield, and he is an environmental deputy there and is heavily involved in tons of things that are happening at the city. And I'm not going to tell you too much about them because they're going to be part of our conversation. But I just want you to know we're grateful that he's here tonight, and he's a really good guy, and we want to welcome him. David, thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Charles, and everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. And yes, I work at the City of Los Angeles. I'm the Senior Advisor on Energy, Environment, Climate for the Budget Chair, Bob Blumenfield. And as Charles mentioned, I have worked at the city for almost 15 years, starting, of course, in the field for Mr. Koretz, and then his ledge deputy. And then I was ledge director to Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, and then senior advisor to him until the end of his terms. And certainly I spend every day working on the environment, the climate, and as Charles mentioned, unfortunately, I didn't make it out of the primary, but it was not only a wonderful experience for myself just as a person, and I encourage everyone to run for office, certainly something that people should do, but immediately came right back. I only took a few days off that week and came right back to work because the issues that we are all facing really wait for no one. And it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to have the conversation. So thank you again for having me.
Wonderful. So these interviews, as those of you who have attended them before, are not just about policy. They're not just about the inner workings of, the inside baseball facts and figures of what's going on in politics. They are about inspiration, and they're about pathways that get a person to where they are making a difference. And David, I know that you are an Angeleno originally. I believe you grew up in Boyle Heights, if that's correct. And I want you to talk a little bit about that. I believe your family came from El Salvador. That's what I remember vaguely of you. But tell me a little bit about your journey going from little David to adult David, and kind of get us to the point where you decided you wanted to work in politics, you wanted to work on environment, that you cared about these things, and that you wanted to make it your career, and how that happened.
Sure. Well, like many people in LA, my roots are really as an immigrant. I was born here in Boyle Heights at White Memorial Hospital, and I am a product of LAUSD. I went to Hobart Boulevard Elementary School, then I believe the second biggest school in the country just by population. We had like 7,000 kids or something. It was a lot. Then I went to Berendo Middle School briefly before attending LACIS on the west side, Fairfax and 18th. And then from there, went to multiple community colleges, really because I had a job from the age of 15 on to help not only my family, but I needed a job. And my colleges corresponded with the work I had. So I was a student at Santa Monica College. I was a student at LACC. I was a student at Trade Tech, and then I graduated from CSUN. You mentioned my family's from El Salvador. Yes, my mom walked here from El Salvador, escaping a war, a civil war, a bloody, unfortunate civil war that was over a decade long, and finally ended in the mid '90s, which is not only a big part of who I am. Her resolve is something that has pushed me to this point. I grew up just with her. My dad left our family when I was very young, and we lived in a violent home. So, as unfortunate as that was, I'm glad that he left because I had a strong, kick-ass mom that made sure that I went to school, that I was focused, that taught me to survive, to respect myself. She is a founding member of the Janitors Union, USWW, SCIU, USWW, and was that story in and of itself was a bedrock of my campaign. Some of you, especially if you're from LA, are potentially aware of the history of the Janitors Union in Los Angeles. There's an infamous picture from the 1990s where LAPD is essentially beating the crap out of a bunch of janitors. And I was there with my mom. I would attend union rally after union rally. We would walk. I didn't know what we were doing exactly, but she instilled that fight for not only fairness but justice. She was fighting for $4.50. She was fighting for dental coverage, of which I wouldn't have had. Wouldn't have been able to go to the doctor. Wouldn't have been able to go to the dentist without that. Um, all of that together has really molded me. And I'll just share a personal anecdote. When I was in college, at one point, actually, there were times that I wasn't doing as well. And I remember my mom in particular, at one time, just talking to her, she mentioned to me that she just asked me straight up, David, do you want to do this? Do you want to be here and be a professional? That's what I want for you. She asked me. And I'm just like, well, yeah, of course I want to do that. She's like, no, you don't understand. You could be like me. If you want to break your back, if you want to work with your hands, you can do that. I'll love you the same. But why are we here? Let's go to El Salvador. Let's go to our family. And the reason that really impacted me is because I was 19. I was a kid. And as always, my mom has helped me see through what's in front of me and helped me visualize there are 50 steps that I have to just to begin, let's say. So that's a little bit about my family and myself. it's driven me to City Hall. When I was at CSUN, I basically I knocked on every door at City Hall until when I was a student, until I got an internship, until I was allowed to get coffee for someone for free and write memos. And I was an intern for almost a year at Council District 12 under then Greg Smith, a Republican, but an environmentalist, someone who made sure that everyone in his office recycled, who everyone in his office was aware of the water that they used and of the plastics that they were part of their lives, and someone that actually really taught me a different perspective because I'm a very progressive, left-leaning person. And from that experience, of course, I graduated college. I had a lot of jobs. This was 2008 when the economy wasn't doing very well. And not only doing a series of jobs, but eventually just getting into political campaigning. And that's what, as Charles mentioned, where I met Paul Koretz, then former assembly member Paul Koretz. And, you know, I was the first one to be at his campaign office. Actually, I started work at 5 a.m. as a debt collector. And then I would go to his office. I was the first one there. Then I would go to my other job at retail, and I would go right back to Paul's office. And I was the last one there to make sure that I had a shot at an opportunity. It wasn't until a year after he got elected that I had the opportunity to serve the city. And from then on, I started at the front desk. So I met Charles after insisting that I could do more, that I could work on projects. In fact, my then chief of staff, Rich Llewellyn, who became the city's city administrative officer, a very important position in the city, once gave me a project that's in the Palms area that is now named the Paul Koretz Greenway, which it still has a few legs to be finished. But he gave me this project and he said, "You want to do policy so bad? Here, take this. This is a water project and it's not going to happen. This is not going to happen." He told me, "But you want it so bad, here." And you know, it's constructed, it's built. Unfortunately, I can't do much more now, but whenever I see it, I want to make sure that it gets appropriations and it's done. And it's actually a water cleaning project. It was to clean approximately 1,600 acres of watershed runoff, and through a cisterns and a series of natural processes, clean the water and then put it back into our storm drains. So my career has certainly been one of not only volunteering to do the work that perhaps others don't want to do, but to just, as my mom always reminded me, take advantage of the situation that's before me. If I can, I will. And it's certainly something that pushes me forward every day.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, he's talking about Westwood Greenway, which we've actually been involved
That's
in
right.
and done volunteer days with our chapter, where many of you have come out and done weeding there, and you've seen all the native plants and the butterflies and the songbirds. None of that happens if you don't have a few key people in that process, and David is one of those key people. And that was it was a 15-year project to get that to happen, and a lot of people along the way made very important contributions, but David was actually very much part of that. So those are some great stories, by the way. Thank you very much for that as an intro. You've set us up well here. So I want to know. I get that you wanted to work on politics, and was it that moment where you were told to go work on this water cleaning project that you became interested in environmental work? Because I think you're best known as a real leader in that space. And is that kind of just what happened? That's where you got traction and ended up being interested in it?
Certainly, I think as an individual, as a person, I've always been an environmentalist. To the degree that I have held myself accountable to that, and that I've worked towards it, I would say it's fair to say that I have improved year after year. Paul Koretz, I credit a lot to, someone who, you know, though of course no one's perfect, and I certainly don't agree with all of his positions. He was a real leader when no one was talking about these things. And my good friend and colleague Andy Schrader, who I had the privilege to not only work with, but learn from, and to you know, from his just amazing ability to organize and to get people involved and for people to care. Ultimately, in politics, as I learned even more so in my campaign, the hardest thing, in my opinion, to do anything is to make sure that when we disagree, that you don't leave the table, that you don't get up and say, forget this. And Andy in particular has an amazing and unique ability to just bring folks together. But that's all to say that all those moments together certainly pushed me in that direction. It also happened to be that it was there at a time when Paul Koretz had the then crazy idea to do the plastic bag ban, to focus on single-use plastics. We then moved forward with the straw ban, in particular, when I was at Mitch O'Farrell's office. That's something that I drafted, that I introduced that Mitch introduced, but I did on his behalf. And I want to be very clear that although my work is certainly behind the scenes, it's been for the members that have been in office, but I have been very fortunate to have been given the trust and the authority to get the votes, to put the work together, and frankly, to build a coalition. So all those pieces together really are part of the tapestry, if you will. But if I had to say one policy in particular that I think really solidified that this is what my primary policy focus will be, is when then Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell introduced his intent to have a 400 megawatt, 400 megawatt solar, 300 megawatt battery project on Navajo land. If you don't know Mitch O'Farrell, he's a great man. Unfortunately, he lost. He is
former council member.
Former council member. Thank you. For the 13th district, he is the first Native American ever elected to the city council, and under his direction, I was fortunate to be able to remove Columbus Day from the city's administrative code and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day. We removed the Columbus statue in front of City Hall. Most people don't know that we have two statues. We had two statues in front of City Hall. One was of George Washington, and the other one was to Christopher Columbus. So we did that. And in that year, he introduced his intent to place this utility supporting project on Navajo and Diné Navajo land. And that's really important, not just for the generation. Now, 400 megawatts of solar, what does that mean? That we're talking about between 200,000 and 300,000 homes, depending on the usage. That's a lot of homes. Almost 20%. Almost 10% of the city's full capacity. And one of the reasons that it's so important to me is because we used to buy coal power from the Navajo for well over 40 years. When the city divested from that policy, if you will, from that investment, and we changed our policy because we were going to get off coal, something that began under then Mayor Villaraigosa and continued under the leadership of Mayor Garcetti. Mitch really stepped up. And one of the reasons that I really credit this policy as truly being a turning point for me is because it was about, not just about the environment, it was about these people that, if you've ever been to Navajo land, the need out there in Navajo land is heartbreaking. We're talking about a loss when the coal plant closed, a loss of almost 1,000 jobs, which this was celebrated here, and it should be, the closing of that plant, but we have real impacts to people. So our plan was not only to have the Department of Water and Power, a wholly owned utility by the city, to go out there and do that project, but to place it on Navajo government land so that the utility, we were going to buy power from this power plant, if you will. The utility, Navajo Electric, would pay Navajo government for that right to use that land, and then we would buy power. Unfortunately, not only did Mitch lose, but the president of the Navajo, he lost as well. And that project is on standby. Now, it still could happen, but, we went out there. We went out to Navajo land, and just the great need that I saw, but truly, I think, in particular, the opportunity for the city of LA and other municipalities and independently owned utilities as well, like Edison or PG&E even, if you will, to tap into Native American land and sovereignty so that we benefit and they benefit, was something that really just opened my eyes. And from then on, we introduced LA 100, which, if you know what that is the city of Los Angeles's intent to have 100% carbon-free energy by 2035. From then on, Mitch introduced his complete municipal solar decarb policy, which right now it's actually one of my main aspects. He introduced the electric vehicle master plan. These are all policies I drafted and I wrote. And it's really helped me focus not only on the topic, but on getting the utility that the city of LA owns, that we all own, to do what we need them to do. And if you follow, especially power policy and politics in the state, getting Pacific Gas and Electric or SE Edison to not only do the investments, but to put their money where their mouth is extraordinarily difficult. Already we're hearing pushback from the utilities of the state that they may not make the goals that the state has made for them. So in this, it's something that has, I truly, think of as a moment with Navajo that, turned my attention towards it and has been the spring to many, many of the policies that I worked on then for Councilmember O'Farrell, and then I work now on behalf of the budget chair to make sure that they're funded, staffed, and effectuated.
So let's dig into that a little deeper for a second, because part of what you do in my capacity in this organization, I'm doing advocacy. So I have the luxury of saying exactly what I want to say and saying the same thing in public that I say behind the scenes, because I am not held accountable to anybody within reason when I'm advocating for a position. So I can take our organization and take our leadership team, and we can go into a meeting and we can say, this is what we should do, period. But you are in that position of trying to actually make things happen. And it's a situation where you have to marry your ideals with a sense of pragmatism, and that whole conversation about how politics is the art of the possible. And you and I have talked about how you never want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And so, can you talk a little bit about the role of somebody who does what you do, which is to take the temperature essentially of the political environment and determine how can you move forward, what would be an overreach, because you're going to have to bring certain parties on board, and how you're balancing all these balls in the air in order to get something that, in the statement about how the perfect compromise is what makes everybody a little bit unhappy, kind of a thing, and that you're the one who is often put in that position in the middle.
Yeah, I think especially in running for office, I saw people believe what they believe, and it's a beautiful thing for folks to be very passionate, and especially for people that are experts in their field, or that have a passion that has allowed them to be educated in a certain method or field, like I said. And it's very hard at times to get all those folks, like I said earlier, not only together at the table, but don't leave. Please don't leave, especially if you disagree. I can think of a number of instances where I've had to change a policy, change a motion, perhaps to achieve victory at a future time, if not today. And that is a very important aspect when you're governing. I have a story I shared with Charles that I'll share here, that there was a nonprofit in particular, I won't name, that actually ended up supporting me for my campaign, and I'm very grateful to them. But one of their staffers disagreed with me on an initiative that then Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell introduced, which was a motion, a direction to the city to have our policy be that we will end fossil fuel usage, that our policy is to end it, that our policy is to electrify and to procure the vehicles, equipment, and methods to achieve that goal. We passed that policy just fine. It was a policy that was adopted. That in and of itself is not enough, because then I have to, like I said earlier, procure. I need to have the staff for it. I need to have the planning for it. And if I'm not doing those three things, if we're not hiring, planning, and procuring and purchasing, then we're not doing anything. In that instance, because the motion didn't end fossil fuel that year, I believe this was 2022, this nonprofit wouldn't support it. And they negotiated with me where they said, okay, by the end of this year, you won't stop using gas. You'll stop using gas. And that was impossible. We cannot do that. First off, we're attempting to get to 2035 to fully electrify the grid, to fully be off carbon fossil fuels, and with a power mix that is wind, geothermal, solar, obviously, et cetera. And the very reality of just everyday life is the moment that the lights go off, the moment that we can't heat a pool, that is the fastest way to lose political power and strength. This is something that I think, I won't say friend, but my colleague and I disagreed on. And it really, I told him that I thought it was nearsighted. I thought it was wrong. However, I respected their decision. I work towards that goal every day now in the budget chair's office. Well, for Mitch O'Farrell, I ran the energy committee. So that was a different policy strength that I had then. Now my strength through Bob is in purchasing, procurement, and planning, like I said. And even though we adopted that policy, every year, your mayor and your city council make budgetary and practical decisions. For example, the voters passed a law known as HLA, Healthy Streets LA. Well, the city council and the mayor have to appropriate towards that, meaning bike paths and improved infrastructure on streets. Similarly, for us in the environment, I could put up, 100 megawatts of solar battery this year, and next year it could all go to zero. And in fact, multiple times in the times that I've been with Bob, the city has tried to do that. Very recently, actually, I very proud of the fact that an effort to fully defund our entire decarb program was stopped. And if hopefully I'm clear on that, the city wanted to take every dollar away from every electrification, solar, and decarb project that we had in the name of a budget shortfall. And again, thankfully, the budget chair disagreed, and through a lot of discussions and meetings, that was averted. But it's an everyday, every month fight. One that I'm actually literally working on now as I prepare for the mayor's budget that comes out shortly. And in that, I'll finish this comment with, it's not just on the backs of LA taxpayers and LA ratepayers. Part of my job is to make sure that the state of California is aware of what we're doing and is backing us up. In fact, we're working closely with a series of incoming state senators and assembly members, but one in particular, representing the Berkeley area, is going to partner with a state senator that represents the Valley to introduce not only a series of budget asks, but policy to assist cities on the unfunded mandate to electrify. Because the state produces edicts, they do a press conference, they declare victory, and then we have to figure it out. And all that together is to say that policy building and certainly political disagreement is hard, but we're talking about a long game here. We have to be ready to disagree today so that we can agree tomorrow. And that's it's something that requires a lot of patience.
You're giving me lots of good stuff here, David. You're making it too easy on me here. I've got a whole list of questions and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I appreciate it, man.
I'll say
I want to, since we talked about this a little bit before, I want to talk just a little bit more about your personal journey. I know that you had a partner that passed away due to cancer, and you had said that that was an instrumental moment for you in terms of motivating you to run for office. You run for office, it didn't work out. You then do some pivots, and one of the things you started working on, which I will be remiss if I don't mention it in this room, is the effort to move away from artificial turf in the city of Los Angeles. And as many people in this room are very much aware, the climate reality chapters in LA County have been instrumental in building a coalition that's called the SoCal Stop Artificial Turf Task Force. And we are working on this problem on multiple levels, but one of the most productive relationships that we've had is with you working on trying to move that ball forward on city council level. And that's one that's also had complications, the same kind of things you were talking about, where not everybody's ready to move at the same time, kind of a thing. Can you talk about just briefly, because I do want to open this up to questions to other people, but talk about that journey of how you came out of the election, it didn't go where it went, or didn't go where you wanted it to, and how you then pivoted and started working on things and were able to have such a productive 2024 after, after having to end your campaign.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, her name was Nicole Trujillo, and she passed away at 41 of cancer, and she was a city employee. She was actually a budget analyst for the Bureau of Street Services, and she was wonderful, and certainly passed away too soon. Yeah, her passing really influenced me when the seat opened up. She passed away in February, and
In
of course,
23, right?
yes, thank you, yes, of last year. And in that time, the well, again, with I didn't even know, but the assembly member of the seat that I ran for had decided to run for city council. And the reason that it's important to me is, Nicole's passing in particular is, I was obviously distraught, and it was a tough time when I learned of that. I knew that had she been here, she would have been the first one to support me on that. And it was a almost a method to do it with her. And with that said, the campaign itself was very tough and long. I unfortunately, I raised, I think, a respectable amount of money, $300,000 from friends. I gave myself my life savings, um, you know, just everyone I could possibly lean on. My opponents, one was a self-funded, wealthy person, formerly incarcerated, and the other one is the now assembly member elect, Jessica Caloza. And the funding that was in that race speaks for itself. I don't want to say too much about it, but I will say that my supporters were environmentalists, they were unions, they were immigrants, they were friends and family, and they were people that were interested in not only the respectful union work that I advocated for, the investments in the Cal State system that I graduated from, which, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but the Cal State system is the only system that's not in our California Constitution. So the system that is helpful to the most immigrant working class people in this state is the least funded, is the one that has the most variability within its budgets, which is why it is hard to deliver for those communities. And that's something that I had really targeted. Um, but with that said, to get to your point, Charles, about artificial grass, as soon as the election was over, I did make it, and I came right back, and I started focusing on policy again. Of course, one of the aspects that I had worked on under Mitch's office, as I mentioned, was the straw ban, and in particular the waste stream. As many of us know, the Department of Water and Power has actually found micro and nanoplastics in our water as of 2023. And when I found this out, of course, Councilmember Bob Blumenfield introduced his initiative to make sure that the Bureau of Sanitation and the Department of Water and Power are at the forefront, not only to get federal dollars and state dollars, but to work with our local water agencies, the Metropolitan Water District, the Orange County Water District, to make sure that we are sharing information and that we're sharing in costs, because these are the impacts of microplastics and nanoplastics are not only awful for our health, but they are costly and expensive. Fast forward to the introduction of the artificial grass ban, which was how it started. That was the initiative that I drafted for Bob Blumenfield, that we introduced, that passed Energy Committee. And unfortunately, when it came to the city council, the then president of the city council had a not only a different take on the subject, but negotiated with Councilmember Blumenfield so that rather than do a outright ban, because our goal was to stop all installations of artificial grass and begin a plan to essentially go back to green, uh, work out the intricacies and details on how to have playing fields in particular, because that's what the city has, that are natural turf. And the president really objected, not because and President Krikorian, again, let me take a moment to say, is a leader in the anti-plastics movement. Without his work, we would not be where we're at today. But his office, this is an example of the pragmatism that we need to show. His office really more or less, put me on the spot of, okay, so let's say we take out the Whitsett Fields, which is a park in his district. Excuse me. The Whitsett Fields we just rip out the artificial grass, and let's say we try to seed it. As they
We're
told
talking
me,
about rec and parks playing fields, mostly for soccer, as well. Just for everybody.
Yes, thank you. They explained to me that those fields are used from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. That if we do that, they're going to play on dirt, and that is something that the council president would not support. I didn't have an answer for them. And even when I tried to include parks in Bob's district, which, for example, there's one that I'm working on right now at Lanark Park in the West Valley. Even there, the field staff and it was difficult for me to get them to agree. Yes, we should just say it, because we didn't have a solution. We didn't know. Okay, yeah, let's not put artificial grass there. Then what? And this is an example of yes, the policy is going to get there. We just need to do the work of the science and the staffing analysis of how are we going to maintain these things. From us, you can extrapolate LAUSD, the LA Community College District, the UC, CSUs, etc. Anyone that uses these fields. In particular, as Charles knows, and hopefully many of you know, our work is week to week, month to month, step by step. And the current plan at the moment is to do the scientific studies on the impacts of the PFAS and PFOS within the artificial grass. Not just that, but any other contaminant that seeps through the membrane and into the soil. But also, what type of grass are we going to use? How are we going to maintain this? For context, the city of LA has about 70 artificial grass fields. And excuse me, we have 4 staff that maintain them. Should they be natural turf, we would need 40 more people. In a budget crunch, especially, we can't hire them. This is where
we're going to help you solve those problems. There are solutions to it, and we're going to work together and help you solve the
goal. Correct.
So we're definitely going to find solutions to those. And to that end, this is a great time for me to point out that a coalition meeting we're going to have on December 8th that I'm going to just put in the chat room for everybody to see it with our partners at the LA Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. Lisa just posted that today, so it's not on our calendar yet, but it will be up there this week, hopefully. And invite all of you to attend that too, where we're going to talk about those very things and very solutions. I don't want to monopolize David's time with that tonight. I have one last question for you, David, and then I do want to open it up to our members who have questions for you as well. My last question for you, and I always ask this of everyone who does this series, is when you have periods of time, days, weeks, months, whatever it is, where you've been working on something that you know is the right thing, it's right for the planet, it's right for the people that you care about, and it's just not going forward, and you've been shut down time after time, and you're just frustrated because so much work seems like it was all for naught. What do you do individually to find the inspiration to keep going, to not just be crestfallen, and to, step up, stand up, and go back to the same work again?
I just go to work the next day, and it's something, again, that I credit to my mom. Just don't give up, don't stop. I can't stop. We have to keep going. It's not possible. It's not an option to stop. And And I'll say that it's important to really have that mindset because we're not going to win every time. We're not going to win each day, but we can't stop. We got to keep going. And especially now under the current federal administration that's incoming, I think that's a sentiment that's more important than ever.
Great. Okay, Michael, if you could take us out of spotlight so we can see the whole room again when you get a chance there, buddy. And we're going to open it up to questions. If you have a question, raise your digital hand, or you can turn on your camera and raise your physical hand if you prefer that. And we'll see what some people from the attendees are interested in asking about. You're always shy at the beginning, and then at the end, everybody raises their hand. We don't have time to get everybody. So if you want to ask a question, go first. Don't be shy. I do see in the chat, I have a question from Kat. It says, there you go. Kat, why don't you read your question? And so I don't have to for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was I'm curious if there's work being done, if it's behind the scenes or whatnot, that encourages the utilities like the PG&Es and SoCal Edison and all of that, to optimize their existing grid. I don't know enough about what upgrading or updating or whatever technically what all that stuff is, but what I've been hearing about is the transmission of energy across the grid is inefficient, and that simply by upgrading our existing systems, that we would be able to take a pretty big step forward. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, and if there's anything going on that we can kind of keep our eyes open for.
Certainly. Well, I think, first of all, thank you for the question. And let's, for a moment, differentiate between IOUs or investor-owned utilities, which is what you're talking about, Edison, PG&E, and others, and MOUs or municipal-owned utilities. The two are very separate, as MOUs are owned by municipalities and they're controlled by us, frankly, versus the private companies, which have to make a profit. So, one, are there efforts? Yes. In fact, in my campaign, I worked with many people, but one person in particular named Cheryl Auger, who lives in Pasadena and has worked in the Pasadena 100 movement, certainly on the waste stream. But in particular, her and I, mostly her, drafted a series of recommendations for members to introduce. I believe we called it the Climate Alignment Act. And it was something that I was going to introduce should I have been elected, which the purpose of that was to force but encourage IOUs to share their transmission with, in particular, MOUs like DWP. But we would pay them for it. It wasn't a taking, right? And also require the investor-owned utilities to offer the not just set benchmarks, but what are you doing to get there? And in particular, increase their incentive packages so that people could purchase into these things. And really the secret sauce on power, I believe you're right, it is transmission and distribution, but it's batteries. And they're very expensive right now, and certainly come with their own problems that we in the city have to deal with, especially as we convert our fleets to EVs. If you know anything about EV or these batteries, depending on how they're built and where they come from, if something happens and they catch fire, they have to be treated a certain way. And that's something that we have to really figure out, and we are doing so as well. So there are efforts. And part of the problem, I believe, is that Sacramento in particular is such a closed community. They're so far away. And certainly in my race, almost $1.5 million was raised by these private utilities. I like to think in particular that they knew that what I was saying was that I meant it, because I was asked all the time, and I would say that when I'm elected, it will be my task to end fossil fuel usage in the state of California in a responsible way. Because we're talking, people have jobs, and there's families, and then these are all real things. But we could do it if we wanted to. So my short answer is yes, it's happening. There are efforts out there, and I'd be happy to work with Charles to produce a list of orgs that I'm sorry I don't have the top of my head that you could be affiliated with and work with. But it is very hard. I'll also say that so City of LA, for example, we're about to, I mentioned earlier that we're working with a few senators, state senators, and assembly members because we're spending, I mean, I'm proud to say this, we've spent almost $100 million of general fund dollars on top of almost $200 million of utility spending just in the last few years, insofar as we upgrade our facilities, introduce essentially solar battery hubs where like the LA Zoo is going to be a major solar generating facility, and other places so that we diversify the grid and not just rely on distribution lines. But also I got to be very honest with everyone that the climate reality is impacting our infrastructure, and a lot of the costs are in the fires that, again, these utilities, these mostly private utilities, don't spend enough money maintaining. And you have fire after fire that, sure we remember the governor, not only dealing with this, but mentioning that we're going to have to keep dealing with it. So that is, in a nutshell, where things are at. But certainly it's happening, and I encourage you to keep following it.
The good news is
Awesome.
we just approved a good amount of money in the climate bond to address that particular issue. So we do have things in the work, and there's reasons to be optimistic. Michael, you're up.
I'm going to stay on the power sector for a minute. I've been hearing about LADWP considering investing, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in upgrading existing gas-powered generation stations, and get it with the idea that eventually they would use hydrogen, and ideally green hydrogen, but we don't know how much green hydrogen is going to be available, and there's a lot of other uses for it. So I was wondering a couple of things. One, what do you think about that? Are there ways to does it make sense to shift away from that idea? And also, is the idea, with electricity rates being an issue for people, and high electricity rates making it not as cost effective to electrify from other uses, would it make more sense for our goal, instead of being 100% clean energy by 2035, to be like 98% and save a ton of money on the last 2%? So wondering your thoughts.
I'll start with the last thing that you mentioned. So certainly it's a value statement and judgment, right? It's what do the people want? And at the time of the previous council and mayor, the political will was there to set that target and to do the work to get to 100% carbon free. Carbon free, meaning, like you mentioned, where hydrogen actually was going to be a part of that, let's say, energy mix, and green hydrogen in particular. It's a policy question. It's our choice. Do we want to spend the time, effort, money, engineering, planning, procuring, hiring, everything to get there, including the tough conversations that we have to have? Or do we want to set a lower bar? For me, as an environmentalist, as someone I consider myself a pragmatist, but certainly as a dreamer, my job is to do everything I can to get us to 100% every day. And when the voters say that they don't want that, then that's when I stop. So that's where I sit, and that's how I keep going. Now, you mentioned, I believe, Scattergood is what you're referring to, the Scattergood generating station. So that actually went through the committee, and it was approved under Mitch. And I ran the hearing. And in particular, what we approved was a policy where the only hydrogen we would accept would be green, the so-called green hydrogen. And for those of you that may not know this, when we talk hydrogen, generally speaking, they refer to it in colors: brown hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, etc. Really what we're talking about is how is it made? And is there a carbon emission to generate this quote unquote clean fuel? What we did in committee was we focused on one, the critiques. And I say that, in fact, you could search Sammy Roth did what I thought was a great article, a long article in the LA Times of the intense back and forth that I chaired on Mitch's behalf between, I mean, must have been like 20 different environmental organizations that really hated the policy in specific aspects of it, of what that's not really policy, what DWP wanted to do. And then we set the policy, which was 100% green insofar as no carbon from electrolysis, solar and electrolysis. So in fact, the city's policy is that hydrogen shall be made through electrolysis from solar resources, which it means that we're not splitting methane. We're not, that's not what we're gonna do. The reason that DWP recommended that is a practical one. They'll tell all of us there will be a time when the solar resources are not going to hit what the city needs, and we have to pull a switch or the power's going to go out. And this is a political question that we all have to grapple with. On top of that, what I had to oversee on Mitch's behalf was adherence to the science and the facts. Why do some people hate hydrogen, even if it's quote unquote green? Well, hydrogen, although it doesn't emit carbon emissions, it does emit NOx, which is another highly poisonous emission that is hurtful to people. And for those people living next to that, the scattergood station or the Valley generating station or any of our power stations, they're going to have to deal with that. We had to grapple between the fact that when you burn fossil fuels, you're producing NOx anyway, and you're producing carbon. So so we have an opportunity to eliminate carbon fully. And really the task that in the US Department of Energy, and because frankly, as I told DWP, no one believes you. We need the federal government to come here and say, how did they set their standards? And the conversation that I presided over on Mitch's behalf was really about at what Kelvin temperature does the NOx exponentially grow? And this was the conversation in committee. From that, the city allowed the Department of Water and Power to keep going in this way. And the new city council wanted assurances that they at any point could stop it. And that's more or less where we're at right now. And I know, I'm sure Charles, I don't want to keep talking, but that's more or less where it's at. I personally think that these are tough questions. And I, as a pragmatic person, know that hydrogen is part of our strategy. I will share an anecdote that I once was really, my task really is to put out as much solar as I possibly can to turn as many city, county, metro properties into solar generating facilities to diversify our grid so that we don't rely less and less on those combustible resources. But the department, I think, is a little biased against that. And as I once told them, if the city told you to build a 30 by 30 mile solar grid, then you better do it. And that's, I'll end with, we're in charge. If we want that, well, let's put it on the ballot and do it.
So
but that's
we could have David speak as an expert on probably any issue that we're involved in advocating for. So I appreciate that. I want to throw in though, because I can't resist it. To me, and in terms of framing this in terms of climate reality project, I think it's important that we think of hydrogen as a battery, because clean hydrogen, when it is effective, what you're doing is you're taking solar energy and putting it in hydrogen, which is a way of storing it so you can use it on demand when you need in other applications. I think it makes sense in some situations as a battery. I think it doesn't make sense in a lot more situations than we're being told right now. And that's going to kind of be an issue. If you're interested in that, go to the Green Electrification Committee or come to the Biodiversity Committee, and we'll talk about these issues. And definitely have people like David that we can interact with going forward as we advocate on these issues. Last question we have, it's going to be from Andreas, and then stick around because we will do our trivia thing to see who's going to win a t-shirt tonight, who is listening to David and can answer a trivia question about what David has spoken about tonight. So Andreas, you're up, buddy.
Hi, I apologize. I have to leave my camera off.
Okay, well, we're going to skip you then. I'm kidding. Go ahead and ask your question.
The question that I have is, I know that some cities in the States give credits for people that buy electric bikes. Is there any chance that Los Angeles ever does something like that?
Well, Andreas, I'm sorry that I can't see you. Great picture. I'm so glad you said that because I had the privilege of drafting the e-bike motion that was introduced by Councilmember Bob Blumenfield last year, which the department has fought me over with my colleague Jeff in Bob's office, who handles infrastructure projects. And our goal was to make a new subsidy. And as I told DWP, just give people the money to buy the damn bikes. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, politically speaking, I'm a very progressive lefty person. But the fact is that the government can influence people really in only a few number of ways, whether it's a tax break for a business or, you know, some assistance, et cetera. We help with money. And there are other cities that are beating us to this. Now, you know, it's hard. We're a big city. How do you do it within the rate structure? You know, everything we do affects the ratepayers. I mentioned that I was raised by a union mom, a janitor. She's still a janitor. You know, now of course, we're good. We're much better. But especially then, any changes to the rate is very important. But the answer to your question is we have an active motion that was just talking to the chair Yaroslavsky's office about bringing back because, and I've been on vacation I just got back today from Japan. So I've been out, unfortunately. But our task is to give bikes away and get these e-bikes out there and other multimodal methods of transportation, to get Metro to do it. So the long and short answer is yes. And I hope with this group's help, we can get that done. And that, you know, it's a matter of advocacy and making sure that you're all aware of the file so you can support it. So thank you for the question. And yes, we're doing it.
Yeah, I was just at a panel in Culver City where people from Holland were visiting, and it was very interesting to hear their success in their country.
Yes, I'll say one thing is that, you know, we have a car culture here, and it's not just giving away e-bikes, it's improving our roadways. And I speak from experience. When I was a young kid, I almost lost my arm. I don't know that you can see it, but I have a scar right here. And I was actually skateboarding and in Koreatown, and someone almost killed me and like ran me over, almost severed my arm. And you know, thank God that I have, you know, my utility and that I survived. But that's all to say that I mean, yes, we need to subsidize e-bikes. We need to do that. Multimodal, that's what it's all about. And we need to improve our roadways, and we need to do everything. And it's a matter of priorities, but I am proud to say we are on it.
Thanks for your answer and thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Echoing Andreas, thank you very much, David. You've been maybe the easiest interview I've ever done because I just throw things up and you run with them and give us all kinds of wonderful bits of insight. So thank you so much for coming. I need to point out that this guy, he was just referencing it, but this guy has been on vacation, a much deserved vacation after fighting so hard during the city council sessions to get things done. He takes a vacation and then I bother him by sending text messages. Hey, David, can we plan for you to do this this meeting? And then he takes these messages while he's on vacation, and then he calls me when he lands at LAX today so we could plan and go over things we were going to talk about tonight. So above and beyond, and I want you to know that our organization appreciates you and the work you're doing, and we want you to know that we welcome opportunities to work with you in the future on myriad issues, regardless of the capacity that you have today and tomorrow, because we look forward to bigger and better things from you as well. So thank you so much for your time, And we will be wrapping it up now in a couple minutes. You're welcome to stay, but we owe you one. Thank you.
No, thank you. And just remember, don't give up. We got a lot of work to do. So thank you so much. And I hope to see many of you in the future. Thank you.